All right, what's up? This is Dr. Taylor Krick at the Washington Wellness Center, and this is the recap of your refresh, your real food refresh. So there's a lot of stuff that's included in this refresh package, so be sure to take a look at it. But today I just want to do kind of a recap and an overview of everything and kind of help you put the pieces of the puzzle together, because we have videos on carbs, and we have videos on fats, and we have videos on proteins, and we have foods lists, we have shopping lists, we have the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and we have all these resources for you. But this is more of a big picture 30,000 foot overview of real food refresh, and ending with some strategies that you can implement to keep this exciting, to keep this fresh, and to keep yourself on this refresh, not just for a certain time period, but for the rest of your life. So let's start with the 5 questions that you want to ask about your diet. We have a quick 5-minute video that says, hey, I don't care if you're keto, I don't care if you're vegetarian, I don't care what camp you fall into, as long as your diet can pass these 5 questions. So number 1, is it real food? That one's pretty self-explanatory, but nothing that comes from a box, nothing that comes from a bag, nothing that comes from a package, those are all going to be processed, and we want to eat real food. So a lot of your real food, doesn't have a label. Maybe it comes ideally from a farmer's market, maybe it comes from the produce section, or it comes from the meat section, but you're getting these real foods in their whole form. You're slicing them up, you're chopping them up, you're adding them to your food, to your family's food, and that's what you're using for your ingredients. Is your diet real food? Number 2, is your diet nutrient dense? So that's a lot of the things from the plant kingdom. Is it plant-based? And I talk a lot about bright colors and strong flavors. So eating bright colors, trying to eat every color of the rainbow every single day. And you guys know exactly what I mean when you see a beautiful salad that's looks like a piece of artwork or something, because there's so many colors and it just looks really cool. Oranges and carrots and cabbage, and just a variety of colors. Well, each of those colors does something. Those are all phytochemicals, phytonutrients that do things. So they're really, really important. Polyphenols, antioxidants. So blueberries, your purple eggplant and grapes, your orange carrots, your green tons of stuff, your red tomatoes, they all have different properties. So you want to get a variety and have a nutrient-dense diet. Is it anti-inflammatory? So that includes things like cold water fish like salmon for your omega-3 content, flax, chia, hemp, things like that are anti-inflammatory. But I'd say more importantly, avoiding inflammatory things like vegetable oils, canola oil especially. Conventional meat can be inflammatory. Sugar is certainly inflammatory. Toxins are inflammatory. So things that we find in our processed foods are going to be very, very inflammatory. So you want to stay on the anti-inflammatory side with your diet. Is it low glycemic? So that is how quickly a food turns to sugar in your blood and spikes your insulin response. So you want a slow, steady, little, small insulin response after a meal. You don't want a big spike. That's not going to be good for your long-term health. There's nothing really worse that you can do than spike and crash blood sugar, and it throws off everything else, creates inflammation, and etc. Is that the root cause of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. 5, is it varied? So getting variation. So that might be we talk about weekly variation. You don't want to eat the same thing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's a great way to develop food sensitivities. But also just getting a variety of nutrients, getting protein variety, getting carb variety, getting fat variety. You're getting different good fats from avocados than you get from olive oil, than you get from coconut oil, than you get from grass-fed butter. And all of them have healing benefits. You want a variety. You want the bright colors and strong flavors like we mentioned, so you want a variety during the week. Now this might also be a seasonal variety, and that might be in the summer when the light cycles are longer, things are growing from the ground a lot more, fruits and a lot of our veggies are growing, and it's almost harvest time and things like that. That might be a time where you go more towards a plant-based. In the winter, maybe you go more towards a ketogenic diet, and you cycle and you vary it cyclically or seasonally. There's other things with variation. Maybe you throw in a fast, maybe you throw in a juice fast. If you have well controlled blood sugar, it's the only time to do that. But maybe you just cycle things up and shift things up. Maybe you do a whole 30 for a period of time. But in general, even for the rest of your life, if you stick with this real food refresh type diet, you want variation all the time. So we did videos on sugar and carbs. So just to recap those 3 videos that we have, sugar and carbs, you want to be low glycemic, looking at the glycemic index. You want to avoid things like grains that turn to sugar in your bloodstream and still have an insulin response. But sugar, especially added sugar, is really the #1 concern in our diet today, especially when we talk about our kids and we talk about doing this as a lifestyle and doing this for the whole family. It's added sugars, it's fruit juices, it's all these things that are on your ingredients label that we don't realize are sugar and are having this glycemic insulin response. So go back and watch that video if you haven't yet about sugar and carbs. The next one is I guess maybe the second most important macronutrient is our fats. So what happened in the past is, fat got a bad rap through like the 60s, and then in the 70s, fat had a bad rap, so they pulled fat out of things. They started putting a lot of sugar in things. Well, now we're realizing that we're lacking in a lot of this fat and that we got the fat story wrong. So go back and watch that video. We talk about the sources of good fats versus bad fats. We talk a little bit about omega-6s versus 3s and these different things with fats, but really, really important. Fats form all your hormones, fats form all your cell membranes, fats make your brain. Fats are really, really important to be getting good quality fats. Then lastly, protein. We talked about, just some differences with protein, and the #1 takeaway was quality matters. Whether you're a vegetarian, you're eating plant proteins, you want it from whole, unprocessed sources. But I also said that I have some concerns with the vegetarian diet, and I don't have any concerns with an animal-based diet. I talked about some of the protein studies, but let me throw a caveat in there. I do, if you're eating like McDonald's and Tyson chicken and some of these animal proteins that were raised in feedlots, that were raised in chicken lots, et cetera, given hormones and antibiotics and fed grains, I do have a problem with that. But when there's high quality sourcing, the quality matters, and that's never really been studied. But when we see things coming in their natural state, we see that they have healthier effects rather than some of the bad proteins, whether they're plant-based like gluten, casein, soy, or whether they're animal-based and some of the fat problems in that, and etc. So go back and watch all those videos if you haven't. Now, lastly, I want to leave you with just some strategies, and I'm going to go through all these strategies. Now, we've given you a lot of resources, we've given a lot of information. How do you put it together? How does this work in real life? We've given a foods list, we've given recipes. So, the main concept with this is just like Nike said, is just do it. Just start buying the good foods. Just start throwing out maybe some of the old foods. Purge your pantry. That's a strategy I didn't put up here, but purge your pantry. Just go home and dump out anything that's in a box or that's processed and start buying these real foods. But what are some advanced strategies, some things that you're going to learn along the way? And before I get into them, let me say one other thing. That's it. That's the thing, is this is a process. Depending on where you're at in the process, this is probably not the first time that somebody's told you to eat real food and to avoid processed food. But the point of this is implementing it in a way that it's not a 30-day crash diet, but it's for the rest of your life. And so as you continue to do this, you're constantly learning and evolving and finding where things are at in different grocery stores and finding new ways of cooking things and finding new things that your kids like. And if you go in with that expectation, then this is a forever thing. You're just always learning some of these strategies. My point right now is to just point out some of them so that you might say, oh, that sounds good. I should try that strategy. But you never stop learning and trying and searching and shopping and etc. This is a forever thing. So without further ado, let's talk about some of these strategies. So just to go back, big picture overall, one of the first things to do with a real food diet is get yourself an oil change. And that means switch out all your cooking oils and don't have any vegetable oil in the house. You know, olive oil, coconut oil, those are the best ones to cook with. Butter, ghee's very, very good. Not doesn't have the same problems as some other dairy components do. Same with butter, and ghee's even better as far as any inflammatory components. Great source of certain fats that you don't get elsewhere in your diet. Great source actually of butyrate and short chain fatty acids. And avocado oil is another one, a great high heat oil. You know, we sell in our store, we sell bison tallow just as a new novel, you know, cooking fat, and we also sell duck lard, and we use those at home sometimes. It gets a new flavor, and it's just a little switch up. You know, you think back to our ancestors that they would use the whole animal, and so switching out your cooking oils is a first thing, and just getting those good fats. Number two is maybe switching out your sweeteners. And so, you know, there are sweeteners that are maybe paleo approved, like maple syrup and honey. And I'm not a fan of agave nectar, but those two typically are still contain sugar, but are what would be called paleo approved. But taking that even a step further, they still have an insulin response. They still have sugar to them. There's a lot of benefits to them too. But looking at things like stevia, like monk fruit sweetener. I think that monk fruit might be the best and the most versatile and no insulin response and a 1-to-1 ratio with sugar for recipes. So that's something called Lakanto would be the brand of that monk fruit sweetener. It's also called like Lohanguan fruit is the Chinese name, but monk fruit is kind of the Americanized name. And then maybe things like sugar alcohols, which some people have a bad response to digestively. But that's things like xylitol, erythritol. So there's a brand out there called Swerve. It's really popular when you're, you know, switching over your sweeteners. I think that as you continue to do this, you lose your sweet tooth. But still, if you want to bake, if you're going to do some things that require a sweetener, switch out from sugar and even from honey and maple syrup and switch over to one of these things that don't have a glycemic response. Number three, smoothies. Smoothies are just a crucial strategy. Because, you know, a question that we get asked all the time is, you know, what do I eat for breakfast? You know, I don't want to eat eggs every single day. I don't want to eat bacon every single day. What do I eat for breakfast? And I think a smoothie should be a staple. Now, you can switch it up all the time. I do a smoothie right now that's like coconut milk, some almond milk, some filtered water. Sometimes I'll do almond butter, like a peanut butter alternative, almond butter in there. I'll do a chocolate greens powder. So this is greens, a greens powder is like, you know, a huge salad that's been chopped up into a powder, and so it's all the antioxidants and all the nutrients that come from these greens. Put a little powder in there, and I do a whey protein. Whey is a really bioavailable source. I don't seem to have any problem with any dairy, and whey is a different protein than casein or casomorphin, which are more often the inflammatory components of dairy. So I'll do a whey protein, boost glutathione, some other things. So, and then at other times, let's say that's what I'm doing right now. Probably the go-to is like almond milk, maybe coconut milk. I do it for the calories. But berries, frozen berries, and like spinach or some kind of greens you can put in there. Really quick and easy, high antioxidant, high phytonutrient. It does have some carbs that can get you going in the morning, depending on your personal style. I don't run very well. I don't actually vary with carbs or no carbs, but I don't always encourage that you start your day off with you know, a carb burst. But anyway, it does give you some energy for the day. You could add a whey protein in there. We have a plant-based protein that we sell in our store too. So you could add a protein powder in. You could add a greens powder in. You could add MCT oil in. You can add spices in. You can add liquid probiotic in. I've done before. I've done all kinds of things for smoothies. Smoothies are a staple. If you're doing a real food diet, smoothies are a staple. They're a great to-go food. You know, I bring them to the office every single day and put it in the fridge and drink my smoothie either, you know, all at once or throughout the day. So smoothies are a staple and a really important strategy if you're not doing that. And ask us too. We've got all kinds of smoothie recipes. Flours is another one. So almond flour, coconut flour, cassava root flour. Like there's these different flours that aren't grain based, and that are okay. So there's all kinds of different flours. So once again, that comes back to if you're baking. If you don't bake it, it won't be very relevant. But switch out your flours so that you're using some of these alternative, more paleo approved flours, like the ones I mentioned. Cauliflower. Cauliflower is like my favorite strategy, and I don't know if you can call it a strategy, but it's so versatile. Cauliflower can be made into rice, and it's so nice that now they sell cauliflower rice at the grocery store, and it's so easy and a great rice alternative. So you might ask, what is the problem with rice? Well, it's a grain, it's higher carb. So it could cross react with gluten and some other food sensitivity things. But rice is, typically a pretty benign grain, but still, cauliflower is a lot better. It's a lot lower glycemic. It's got higher nutrient density, and less chance of, any immune reactivity. So cauliflower rice, cauliflower mashed potatoes are like my specialty. If you know how to make them, then you're not impressed because they're really easy. But that's why I'm good at it. Probably you just soak and steam or soak the cauliflower until you can stick a fork in it. Then we use a food processor to blend it up. We put a healthy amount of grass-fed butter in there, and voila, it tastes like mashed potatoes. And I think it's a lot better. You can add other things. We'll do garlic salt in there. We've done like a little dill seasoning in there before. We've added, needed to add some milk sometimes to the almond milk, to water it up a little bit. Cauliflower pizza crust. That's a trial and error thing for sure. But even when it's bad, it still turns out pretty good. It's like that's a saying about pizzas. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. But cauliflower pizza crust, it's just a really, really versatile thing. So I think it's an advanced strategy. Super spices. Use more spices and different spices. Things like curcumin or turmeric. Turmeric together with black pepper. Black pepper actually activates turmeric. So just pepper. Salt. Salt gets such a bad rap, which is like old school news. Now it's like we're under consuming salt, and not iodized table salt, but sea salt that has 80 to 100 other minerals and cofactors in it. There's a variety of salts. Trader Joe's, we don't have a Trader Joe's unfortunately, but they have a thing that I've done before. It's 7 salts of the earth, and they're all like different colors and different flavor profiles, and there's just a ton of different salt. So get a variety of salt. But then there's things like cinnamon. Cinnamon's a very, very high antioxidant spice. Turmeric, like I mentioned, cayenne. There's all these spices with these strong flavors, have healing properties to them, and they're really, really powerful spices, herbs, things like even cilantro and parsley and things like that I didn't mention with spices, but same thing, strong flavors have healing properties. Ferments. Ferments is such an amazing advanced strategy. Now the advanced version is you make your own. You can do kombucha. I'm not as big of a fan of kombucha, but like sauerkraut and kimchi, phenomenal. What I would really suggest around the central Illinois area is 309 Cultures, which is sold mostly at Naturally Yours grocery store. But there's all kinds of things that you can ferment. You can go online and buy starter cultures too, and culture anything. We used to do a lot of cultured fermented salsa because we had a huge garden in Salt Lake, so we'd make all this salsa and we'd give cans out to patients and stuff. You can ferment, bell peppers. You can ferment cucumbers and it's like pickles. You can ferment anything. We did a recipe night at our office one night. It was called Fun with Ferments, and people fermented salmon, people made kombucha, but ferment. So that's a good bacteria for your gut, good probiotics. We talk a ton about probiotics in our office, and we use a ton of probiotics. We probably got like 15 different probiotics that we use for different cases. But fermented foods is a phenomenal way of getting it. It's cheap, it's easy. I'm not a fan of like the typical jar of sauerkraut at the store. It's pasteurized. A lot of times it has things like polysorbate 80 in it. So go with the high quality brands. Go with the local brand if you're around Central Illinois, or look for something like a Farmhouse Cultures if you're shopping somewhere where they don't have 309 Cultures. Soaking and sprouting is kind of a next level thing when it comes to legumes and seeds and maybe some grains. It's something that we don't even really get into in our family because we just go grain free and legume free for the most part. We're not 100% on either of those things, but we're probably like 90%. But soaking and sprouting your grains, your nuts, your seeds, that's something to look into that makes those a lot less harmful and a lot healthier. And then the last strategy is fasting. One of my favorite strategies, probably the most powerful healing thing that is out there and that's available. And it's free and it requires nothing. So that could be daily fasting, like intermittent fasting, like going 14 to 18 hours between meals. So like you stop eating at 6 o'clock at night and maybe you don't eat the next morning until 10 o'clock. That'd be a 16-hour fasting window. Maybe you go till noon and that's an 18-hour fasting window. In general, women tend to do better with a shorter fasting window. Men tend to do better with a longer fasting window. In general, women should fast more at the beginning of their cycle, and then as they get closer to their period, they can up their carb intake and not do the fasting as much. We also do a lot of fasting variation throughout the week. So it's like intermittent fasting a few days a week, throw in 1 day a week of full fasting, like dinner to dinner, throw in 1 day a week of feasting or refueling. But fasting is an incredible advanced strategy. I think that intermittent fasting is where it starts. There's really popular diets out there, kind of fad diets like the every other day diet, which is exactly like it sounds. You just eat like normal every other day, and every other day you don't eat. It doesn't sound sustainable to me. And then there's the OMAD diet, the 1 meal a day diet, which is another thing that like I don't know that that's sustainable, 1 huge meal a day. But to throw that in there occasionally is a phenomenal thing. And then throw in an every other day thing occasionally, and throw in some of these principles from all these different camps. That's how you keep things constantly varied, because they all do have valid, they have merit to them. So and that might be throwing in, a month of a ketogenic diet, and then back to the real food refresh, a month of vegetarian, a month of plant-based, a month of juicing, a month of fasting, maybe not the whole month, but you throw in these different things and just kind of keeping the body guessing, but also moving it in a healthier direction the whole time. So that's a recap of the real food refresh. The 5 questions you have to ask about your diet, the 3 other videos that we have, and some advanced strategies that we just kind of flew through and hopefully gave you some food for thought, no pun intended, and some suggestions and some things to try as you work on this for the rest of your life.